Hey there, Chris here from IELTS Advantage, and we did something really interesting over the past week. Over the past week, we looked back at all of the essays that I've corrected, all the Task 2 essays that I've corrected over the past 5 years. And what I wanted to see was, are there any common things that keep coming up again and again and again? Or what were the things that students changed that really led to success? Or what were the things that the advice that we gave that made the biggest difference? And what I did was, after analyzing them all, I came up with these 5 things that are going to help you guys as much as possible. So yeah, over the past 5 years, I've corrected more than 10,000 writing Task 2 essays. Feedback is very, very important, and it really does help a lot of people. And collating all this information together is really going to help you in this video. So the first thing that was very, very obvious was students are not doing the most important thing, which is clearly answering the question. So Task 2, you get a question. What is your number one job? What is your main job? Well, it's not to show off how amazing your vocabulary is. It's not to show off how many grammar structures you've memorized. It's to clearly demonstrate that you've understood and that you can clearly answer the question. And this seems to be the number one problem. It's not grammar, it's not vocabulary, it's not structure, it's did you actually answer the question? And the answer to that for most of the students that we deal with is no. The answer to the question is not clear on the paper. So why is this, and how can you overcome this problem? Well, there are a few reasons. And looking at the data, these are the 4 reasons that came up. So the number one was students were very confused about what to do, and their writing was a reflection basically of their confused thinking. We tell this to students over and over again. If your thinking is very clear, then your writing is going to be clear. If your thinking is, you're confused about the question and confused about what to do and confused about everything, then your writing is going to be very confusing. And this is not your fault. There are so many different blogs and Facebook pages and YouTube channels and books all about IELTS, all saying different things, that it's no wonder that people are very confused about what to do. And when they look at that question and they're like, well, one teacher says this and another teacher says this and another blog says this, and it all becomes very, very, very confusing, and you're under pressure, you have a time limit, and that leads to some very, very confusing answers. When students start to focus just on one way and follow one method, and I'm not saying to join me, or I'm not saying this because I want you to join my course. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if it's me, it doesn't matter if it's someone else. Follow just one way of doing things, and then your thinking is going to be very certain and very clear, and that's going to improve your task achievement and your coherence and cohesion. So that's the first reason. Being clear on what to do and having that clarity of thought is really going to help you. The second reason, and it's also the most common thing that comes up in our success stories. We recently analyzed all our success stories, and the most common thing that all of those successful students said was planning. We normally, when a student joins our VIP course, we give them a number of essays to send to us, and we give them feedback on that. And normally the first essay that they send, it's very clear that they didn't do any planning. And then we encourage them to do more planning and more planning and more planning, and their essays just become better and better and better and better. And it's related to the first point as well. The first point about your writing is a reflection of your thinking. If you're planning everything out and you're doing all your thinking and you're getting clear on what you're going to be writing before you start writing, then of course your essay is going to be much, much, much clearer. Also, when you're planning everything out, it actually saves you a lot of time, because you are getting all of the thinking and the idea development and the idea generation and the structure, all of the thinking, you're getting that out of the way so that you can just focus on writing and then later on editing. So taking time to plan and knowing how to plan is absolutely crucial. What we've seen in the data by looking at over 10,000 essays was very, very clear. The students who would plan did much, much better than those who wouldn't. But then there was a different category. There were students who planned and those who planned effectively. the ones who planned effectively, doing the right things during planning, were much higher than the other two groups. So it's not only just about planning, it's about learning how to plan effectively and practicing that as a skill and doing that on exam day. The third one was idea generation. This is something that students really struggle with, and what most of the time what they're taught is brainstorming. Brainstorming does not work at all. It works in other things, like if you're trying to think of lots of ideas and you're trying to just free think and be as free as possible when you're thinking, then brainstorming is a really good idea. Like when we're thinking of new videos to make, for example, for this channel, brainstorming is an amazing way to do that. But brainstorming is a complete waste of time when you're writing essays under exam conditions. You only have 40 minutes. By brainstorming, what you're doing is you're trying to think of as many different ideas as possible. That is a waste of time, and it generates a bunch of irrelevant ideas, and then you have to spend time sorting through all those irrelevant ideas, and then you might not even come up with an effective idea. So having a technique, having a strategy that helps you generate ideas that are worthwhile ideas that you can actually use in your essay, and being able to do that and generate those effective ideas quickly is absolutely crucial to success. So once students stop brainstorming and start using our strategies to help them with idea generation, then A, they save a lot of time, and B, they start generating ideas really quickly, but effective ideas that they can actually take and then use in their essay. And that helps them answer the question clearly, because those ideas clearly answer the question, and then they can develop those ideas into coherent arguments. The other thing that we noticed when we looked back at the advice was this: when things really clicked for students was when we told them, put yourself in the reader's shoes. Why are you actually writing anything? Why do you write anything? Why do you write a text message? Why do you write an email? Why do you write an essay? You do that to communicate. It's just communication. You are communicating with someone, i.e. the reader. So putting yourself in the reader's shoes really helps students with answering the question clearly and improving everything to do with their writing. Why is that? Because most people are writing for the sake of writing, and they're just trying to show off to the examiner, show off how amazing their grammar and vocabulary and structures and all of these things are, and not really thinking about, why am I actually writing? Well, I'm writing to communicate with someone, to clearly communicate, and for them to be able to understand me. And once they start doing that and putting themselves in their shoes and asking themselves, will the reader understand this? Is this helping them? Is this clear communication? Then everything kind of transforms, and their whole essay just gets much better. So that's number one. You need to clearly answer the question and demonstrate to the reader, the examiner, that you have answered the question. And to do that, you need to get clear on your thinking, follow one method. You need to start learning how to plan effectively. You need to start learning how to generate ideas quickly and effectively. And you need to understand the real purpose of writing, which is to clearly communicate with the reader. Once you start to learn how to do those things, then we saw a massive increase in scores. Second thing is the basics of writing, the fundamentals of writing. Most of the students, from when they started working with us to when they got the scores they needed, had a massive improvement in the fundamentals of writing. What do I mean by that? Well, the three fundamentals of writing are: do you know how to write an introduction? Do you know how to write main body paragraphs? And do you know how to write a conclusion? Most of the students who we worked with were people coming to us and saying, I've no idea why I keep getting 6.5. IELTS is a scam. I will never be able to do this. It's so unfair. And then we looked at their writing and we pointed out, but you don't know how to write at all. You don't know the fundamentals of writing. You don't know how to write an introduction. You don't know how to write a main body paragraph. You don't know how to write a conclusion. And some of them would get angry with us and be like, oh, why don't they just give me a 7? It's like, you're not going to get a 7 in writing until you learn how to write. So learning the fundamentals of what an introduction is, what's supposed to be included in an introduction, what is included in a main body paragraph, what's a topic sentence, how do you write an explanation, how do you write an example, how do you write a conclusion, what is a conclusion. Most students do not understand these very, very basic fundamentals of how to write an essay. And that is what is being tested. You're being tested on, can you write an essay in English? So would it not be a very, very good idea to learn what an introduction is and a main body paragraph and a conclusion? And it doesn't take very long to actually learn these things. It's not that complicated, but it just takes a little bit of time to learn what these things are and then try and do them. So try and write introductions, try and write main body paragraphs, try and write conclusions, and then get feedback on them. And most students will do them pretty well, but they need a little bit of feedback, you know, fix this and fix that, and then everything becomes much, much, much easier. For many students, you have to learn how to walk before you can run. Being able to produce a band 7 or a band 8 essay is quite difficult for most students, and you're trying to do these things without really understanding or being able to do the fundamentals, which is doing the things that we just discussed. So number 2, learn the basics of writing, learn the fundamentals of writing. What is an introduction, what is a main body paragraph, what is a conclusion, and how do you write those? The third thing that we noticed is vocabulary is 25% of your total mark, but vocabulary is completely misunderstood. The hardest thing about our job when we are doing essay corrections and when we're giving feedback to students is trying to convince them that the simpler their vocabulary, and I put simple in quotation marks, the more effective it's going to be. Because some students have been taught by teachers who tell them that the only way to get a high score is to use like really complex vocabulary. Other students just assume that the more complicated their vocabulary, the higher a mark they're going to get. And it's really difficult to convince a student to take the risk of simplifying their vocabulary and thinking more about the accuracy of their vocabulary and the effectiveness of their vocabulary rather than using these, you know, highfalutin words. But once, it's like, you can notice it in essays, it's like a switch being turned on. Once they accept that advice and start using that advice, then that is often for many, many students the moment where they go from struggling with a band 6 or 6.5 to a band 7 and beyond. And we see this in many of our success stories where students will say, you know, for 6 weeks you were telling me this and I wouldn't do it, and the day that I started doing it was the day that I started getting the scores that I needed. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't use some complex vocabulary or you shouldn't show the examiner that you know how to use vocabulary. What I'm saying is that you should learn how to use vocabulary effectively. Think about how you use vocabulary in your own language. Do you try and use the most complex, complicated words possible when you're talking to someone or writing an email? No, you just use the vocabulary that is appropriate to use in that scenario, and you use it effectively and you use it accurately. And many students are afraid to do this because they think it will lower their score. What we tell students is, you know, try it out, try your way. Try doing it really in a really complex way. You've already been doing that and you failed 6, 7, 8 times. Why not try it our way and see what happens? And invariably, they go and do the test, and next time they get the score that they need. And many people will disagree with me because most of our students disagree with me on that as well. But the data is very, very clear. Those students who do that improve their scores. Those students who don't improve their scores. The fourth thing is about grammar. The thing that was really, really apparent by looking at all the data and looking at all the past corrections was that most students don't need to improve their grammar per se. They need to just improve a few areas of grammar. So what do I mean by that? So if you look at, you know, an English grammar book, it's like the size of a telephone book. It's massive. There are so many different areas of grammar. But what most students struggle with is not everything related to grammar. It's just 1 or 2 areas. For example, I was talking to a student from the Ukraine last night. He's one of our success stories, Vladimir. And when we worked with him, there were only 2 areas of grammar that he struggled with. One was articles, because he's a native Russian speaker, and they don't have articles in that language. And the other was punctuation, as he was unfamiliar with English punctuation. So we didn't need to teach him about tenses, we didn't need to teach him about prepositions, we didn't need to teach him about conditionals. We just needed to focus on those two weak areas. Exactly the same as if there's something wrong with your car, like at the moment my car is at the mechanics because I drove over a log and I punctured a hole right in the undercarriage of the car. Now the only thing that the mechanic needs to do is replace the part, that the undercarriage is one part of the car. He doesn't need to replace the windows, he doesn't need to replace the steering wheel, he doesn't need to, you know, fix the engine. It's just the undercarriage. That's the only thing. It's just one part. Exactly the same happens when we look at a student's essay. We figure out what their main problems are with grammar, and then they can address those specific problems. And when they do that, not only do they improve their grammar, but the coherence and cohesion of their essay improves as well, because it's just much clearer, much easier to understand. So that's the fourth thing. And last but not least, the fifth thing, feedback really does work. And it is an absolutely essential part of the whole process of getting better at writing. It is amazing the number of people who email us every day and say, I've no idea why I keep getting 6.5. I've looked at every IELTS book, I've read every IELTS blog, I've watched every video on, you know, under the sun on IELTS writing, and I don't get any better. It's like, yeah, of course, because you've no idea whether you are actually doing those things effectively or not. Another funny email we often get from students is, I followed your system and I got 6.5. And we say, okay, send me your essay. And we look at the essay, it's like, you didn't follow our system for this reason, this reason, this reason, this reason, and this reason. So you might think that you are doing nothing wrong, but I guarantee if you're getting a 6.5 and you need a 7, you're doing multiple things wrong. That would be like me trying to fix my own car. It's not going to happen. I do not know anything about fixing cars. I need an expert to point out where I'm going wrong and to give me feedback and show me what's wrong. Exactly the same with essays. There could be problems with your task achievement, your coherence, your cohesion, your grammar, your vocabulary, or multiple other things, but you need someone to look at your essays and give you feedback on that. Again, this is not a marketing video. I only work with a very, 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 very small number of students. 99.99% of the content that we make, just like this, is totally free. And you know, I'm very happy to do that. I'm not saying it because I want you to join our course. I'm saying that you probably will waste thousands of dollars failing the test multiple times if you don't take that advice, and because you want to save a bit of money and you don't want to get a teacher to look at your writing. It does really, really work. It does really help. And whether that's with ourselves or with another teacher, do use those services. However, make sure that the services you use are reliable. A lot of people are doing essay corrections these days. Looking at their feedback that they have, some of them are great, some of them are doing just copy and paste jobs. They're not really looking at your essays. They're just, you know, doing copy paste, generalized feedback, and that's not really going to help you. That's it. That's what we discovered over the past 5 years and looking at over 10,000 Task 2 essays. What we have coming up for you guys next week is another $1 challenge. We haven't done a $1 challenge in about 6 months, but what we do every 3 to 6 months is we get a bunch of people into a group. They all pay $1 and we run through a Task 2 essay, teaching you how to answer the question, running through the fundamentals of essay writing, helping you with grammar, helping you with vocabulary, and helping you improve your scores. We will be releasing that next week, and it's just $1. It's probably the best dollar you'll ever spend. Normally, our courses are between $500 and $700, so this is a good way to get feedback on your work, learn what to do, and improve your writing scores. More on that next week. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and that was useful. It took a long time looking at all those essays, so hopefully that distilled knowledge will help you out. Thanks very much, guys. See you again soon. Bye-bye.